Alfonso Cuarón. Alfonso, thank you so much for doing this.
My pleasure.
So there's so much we could talk about. We have limited time. There's also some things we can't talk about because we don't want to spoil anything to do with disclaimers. So this is going to be a bit of a dance. But before we talk about disclaimer, I just wonder if we can go over some of the kind of fun biographical details that some may know, others may not. But you were, can you just share where you were born and raised to begin with?
Mexico City.
And how, at a pretty young age, did the idea of, being passionate about film and pursuing filmmaking, how did that enter the picture for you?
Since I remember, I just wanted to make movies. As a child, the only things I didn't differentiate what was in a film, what I was an actor, what was a screenplay, or what was the director was something out of my understanding then. And eventually, you get to know that there's a director because I saw a documentary of making of Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, that's so cool. I want to do that. And ever since.
So you go off to film school, and while there, you meet somebody by the name of Emmanuel Chivo Lubezki.
I met him before.
Before even?
I met him because we used to frequent the same cine clubs.
Okay.
And, and we were the ones that then after the cine club at the party were in a corner just geeking about films and stuff.
So you end up at film school at the same time, and you end up being invited to leave film school at the same time, right?
Yes, we were, politely invited to leave. Yeah.
What was that about? You were...
It was a combination of, I think that the school was a bit backwards. And now in retrospect, I think we were just so annoying and arrogant, but we were both right, let me put it this way.
Right. So out in the real world, you were doing all kinds of jobs for a number of years. I think production assistant, boom operator, assistant editor, assistant director. This is for years before your feature directorial debut in 91, Solo con tu pareja. Yep.
Thank you.
In the course of those years, how did you meet the two other gentlemen with whom you are affectionately known as the Three Amigos?
When I had a long career, first as a boom operator. I did, I don't know how many, more than 15 movies as a boom operator. And then I got established as an assistant director. While I was an assistant director, I heard about this strange guy from Guadalajara who was doing makeup effects. And they were talking about how talented he was. Then we start working in the same, we got opportunity in this kind of Twilight Zone, that it was this...
like an anthology,
an anthology. It was a horror anthology, that it was more like a toilet zone because of the budget. and he was going to direct one and me another one, but we have never met. And I have to confess, because everybody was talking about how talented he was, I was a little skeptical and yeah, one day I was in the office, in the production office waiting, and there was this guy that obviously was the weird guy from Guadalajara, and he was just looking at me, kind of smiling, and says, hey, you're Cuarón? I says, yes, you're Del Toro. And says, hey, you did that episode, that thing? And I says, yeah. And I was very proud of it because everybody told me that it was the best. And he said, well, yeah, you base it upon a Stephen King story. He says, yes. And we start talking, professing our love for Stephen King. And we start talking for hours, and then other books and stuff. And then he says, hey, can I ask you a question? And I said, yeah, sure. He says, if the Stephen King short story is so awesome, why you show socks so much? And I started laughing like crazy. And I said, okay, why? And he explained me in such an eloquent way why my show sucked. And we became best friends. It was like, just like that. It was...
So that's the first two amigos. That's Guillermo del Toro, Alfonso Cuarón. Where does Alejandro González Iñárritu enter the picture?
I have already done, I think, A Little Princess. And
First English language, 95.
First film, feature film in English, yeah. And this guy, Chivo, had worked with Alejandro doing some commercials or something. And he had told me how great he was, to which I was skeptical again. And he said, hey, can I give your contact to Alejandro? I said, sure. And he contacted me and says, can I go and meet you in Los Angeles? I think I was in the post of Little Princess or something. And I said, sure. And we met, and he wanted to show me his a short film he had done, and we immediately got along. And based upon his short film, we started having a conversation, and we became very close. Later, he did Amores Perros. I saw, he showed me his cut. It was still a very extended cut, and it was absolutely brilliant. And it's when I called Guillermo and said, man, you have to see this. This is really incredible. It's the best thing I've seen in a long, long time by not only Mexico, but any other director around. And I asked Alejandro if I could send it to Guillermo. And he sent it to Guillermo, he saw it. And typical Guillermo, he called him and he says, hey, Alejandro, I saw your film. I want to go, I'm flying tomorrow to sit in the cutting room with you. He was in Mexico. In Mexico. So Guillermo, without knowing Alejandro, went, knocked at the door, and says, okay, I'm here to work on your cut.
Yeah, that's great.
And then there's a big polemic because Guillermo says that he cut something like 20-something minutes. Alejandro says that no, he only cut 3.
And he cleaned out his
I think that
refrigerator,
Guillermo
right?
is right. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah. So I think the world of, Mexican film lovers was aware of you guys early on, obviously, but I think it was the year 2006 where it really blew up internationally, because that year you had Children of Men. Mm-hmm. Alejandro, Guillermo had Pan's Labyrinth.
Yeah, amazing.
And Alejandro
Had Babel.
Had Babel, yes. And so this idea that there were these 3 guys from Mexico who also happened to be such close buddies, and I think it really made everybody pay more and more attention. And then I'll also note, between the years of 2013 and 2018, a 6-year period of Oscars, 5 of the 6 best director Oscars went to the 3 of you guys, which is an unbelievable stat. You with Gravity and Roma, Alejandro with The Revenant and Birdman, and Guillermo with The Shape of Water. So I guess I just wonder, what it has been like as the 3 of you guys have kind of risen to prominence together. Do you think it's, I know you show each other's work, You also do that with others. I know you've talked about Paweł Polakowski, among other people who you... But what's it been like to kind of go through this with these two other guys, in a sense?
Well, first of all, I think it was the Academy catching up for 50 years without Mexicans.
Right. Okay.
And, yeah, but the collaboration is the core of the collaboration is that we love each other, we trust each other, and we are brutally, painfully honest with each other.
Right.
You know, it's like, the conversation is not necessarily easy when we are collaborating and showing each other films. I'm terrified because I know that it could be tough. And sometimes me or the other person, is listening, and at the end you can tell the other person is a bit upset, or myself, I feel like, they don't understand anything. And then you go to sleep, and the next morning you say, okay, I get it, and you call them again.
Now, there have been times where it was not the next morning, right? It might go, the sore feelings might last a little longer.
I guess so.
Which is understandable.
No, yes, I guess so. But then there's immediately like a comeback, and we start executing the other stuff. Yeah. I mean, but it's really honestly, like, the honesty is the key. Obviously with Alejandro and Guillermo, I have that collaboration. With Paweł Pawlikowski, I have it as well. And so much that a film that I was prepping, I stopped prepping because of a conversation I had with him.
Really?
And because he was in his very kind of more stark, polished way, pretty much he explained me also, well, he didn't say it sucked the way that Guillermo says it. He said, I completely don't get it. And the way in which he didn't get it made me realize that probably I didn't get it either. Wow. And so I...
Well, and you and he have been in sync in certain ways as well, because the year of your very personal film in black and white, coming-of-age film, Roma, he had his own. And I guess, was that purely coincidental, or you guys had conversations that may have led you both to the similar track?
Well, yeah, we are very aware of each other's project, and we are all constantly talking. It's I have a draft or something, I send it to him, or he. But even before that, we're talking about what you thought, what you want to do next, and we discuss things, and the conversation with each one of them is very different. With Paweł, mostly sometimes it's not even about films. It's about other aspects, he loves books or history. And we're just constantly chatting about that stuff, and then here and there then starts to influence what we are talking about. So it's, with Guillermo and Alejandro it's more telepathic, if you might.
Yeah. So the last project of yours, a feature-length project that we saw prior to Disclaimer, was Roma 5 years ago. Great. I'm just going to note a few things about it before I ask the question. Very personal project, in black and white, made in Mexico, no household name stars, and an amazing result. With Disclaimer, in almost each of those regards, you've chosen to do, in a way, the opposite. You've got great, world-famous stars. Obviously, it's in color. It's shot around the world, adapted from a book. So while there may be personal elements that you connect to, this is not your story. So I wondered, after Roma, was it a kind of deliberate thing to go in the completely opposite direction with the next thing, or is that just the way it worked out?
I don't know. I mean, I don't really know how things happen. They just happen, and is when something makes sense and something clicks, And what I know is I've been for a long time intrigued by the long format, because there are many filmmakers that they have experimented the long format in a way that I deeply, deeply love and respect. And I'm talking from Fassbinder with Alexander Platz, or Bergman with Sins of a Marriage of Fanny and Alexander, and or David Lynch with his Twin Peaks, all the way to Bruno Dumont with Le Petit Quinquin, that I absolutely love. And I was intrigued about that, and I tend to do stuff that brings me out of my comfort zone. And I realized I have never done something overtly narrative. And I thought maybe it's because I don't know how to do it. So that's what was part of the motivation of doing it, to do something that it has an extended narrative form, also with a lot of dialogue.
Well, and so this is for people who are going to be catching up to it. It's 7 installments, 7 episodes, about a little under an hour each, but totaling something like 5
hours, 5 hours and a half, yeah.
So this just
very short 1 hour. So.
Yeah, no, it zoom. You can't stop. That's the amazing thing about this. But I wonder, this story specifically, it's from a 2015 novel, Renee Knight's, right? And what do you think spoke to you about this story beyond the idea that you might want to do something in a longer format? Was there something specifically about this story that appealed to you?
It's one of those that you read something and you see a film. And sometimes the film that you see is even not so close to the book. It's like sometimes, I have done a film in which I read the concept. I didn't read the book, and I didn't want to read the book because I didn't want it to get distracted from the movie that I saw in my head. And in this case, the whole thing spoke to me. I didn't know how to do it in film, but I saw the opportunity for the long format, as you say. Then thematically, there were a lot of elements that I felt, okay, this is very interesting. But also, it was very daunting for me, some of those thematic elements. Other elements that I wanted to add. And there was something I was very intrigued for a long time. That is, I'm intrigued by voiceover when it's properly used. Voiceover, in the most cases, and mostly in mainstream films or TV shows, is used in a very lazy way. It's like a shortcut just for lazy storytelling.
Exposition.
Or exposition, or I remember the first time in Tu Mamá También, when we were going to use voiceover, I suggested that to my brother, who we wrote together, and he refused because of the same arguments. And he says, so you want to do something like the Wonder Years? Yeah, it's like, I remember the summer of... And it was when I showed him Masculine, Feminine of Godard that says, okay, I get it, let's do it.
Right.
And in this case, I've been intrigued about the use of tenses, and in English is like, it would be what is not at times. No, it's tense, or what is
tense.
First person, second person, third person.
Yeah, sure.
And I was intrigued because there's a stark difference between a voiceover in first, second, and third person. And second person you rarely see in films. It's very, very rare to find films that is the second person, that is the you. It's a voiceover talking about you. that is, in Spanish, is acusativo, in French, accusative.
Yeah, sure.
It's like if you're accusing someone. So I thought, okay, it would be interesting to do something which you have three voices going at the same time, one in first person, second person, and third person. Because then I was very intrigued how that changed the perception of audiences according to how, with the tense, I guess it is, of each one of these voices. Because part of what it was intriguing for me was the approach of narrative, how we absorb narratives, and how at the end the most important voice is not that first, second, and third person, but the voice of the audience experimenting the piece and making his or her own conclusions. So that was part of the experiment that I was very intrigued. Besides the thematic elements that, I hope that that those elements would speak to people as well.
So as you're writing this, having never really, adapted or created anything like it before, how did you even arrive at the way of how you structure a 7-part limited series? And also, while you're writing it, that's when you started thinking about the casting during the writing, or at least the main actress?
I always, even before I started writing, I knew I wanted Cate Blanchett. Yeah. And then the fear while writing was a terror, actually, was that she would not do it, because I didn't know, I could not imagine it differently.
And by the way, I don't think she has done limited series before, right?
Well, the thing is that I don't know how to do TV. And I announced that to Apple. I said, guys, I don't know how to do TV. And I think it's too late now for me to learn how to do TV. Yeah. I'm not that interested about learning how to do TV. I know how to do films. If I do this, I'm going to approach it as a film. That's the reason your question about if I was never having done it, I never thought about that. I was doing it as a film. And when I spoke with Cate, it was as if we were talking as a film. My collaborators, they have never done anything but films. And we said, this is a film. We're going to do just a film that happens to be very long. and that was a miscalculation. I have to say, if anything, the miscalculation was that when I said I'm going to do a film that is very long, I then realized that when people do those 7 hours or 8 hours or 10 hours, say in television, in most of the cases they have several directors. Mm-hmm. And secondly, they shoot very fast. I know how to do films, and I'm not very fast. And so the shoot was very long.
Was it made like a 7 films, in the sense that you're going to deal with each installment? Maybe they'll be out of sequence or whatever the way you shoot within each one, or is it truly one big film where you're jumping between episode 6 and 2?
I don't know how to do the one that you're talking about. Yeah. Doing. It's as if I do a film and I'm going to concentrate just in the first part of the film and in the second. No, here was, as always, I try to shoot as much in continuity as possible. So it was just approaching like a film. The only difference that it was part of the experiment, and that was suggested by Chivo, by Emmanuel Lubezki, the cinematographer, is that he's a collaborator that enters very early into my process. Since I'm writing, since I have an idea of something I want to do, at least in his collaboration with me, I consider him a co-filmmaker. We're always bouncing ideas, and I get so involved in his lighting. He gets so involved in my directing.
Right.
You know, it's very kind of organic, the whole thing. And when I told him that I wanted for each one of these voices, the first, second, third person, and there is another voice without narration that is like what happens in a novel, that I wanted 4 distinctive, not looks, but cinematic languages. So in terms of film grammar, to be completely, starkly different one thing to the other. And he loved the idea, but then he suggested that to make it even more contrasty, to bring another cinematographer to do some of these voices. And it's when we both have the idea of bringing Bruno Del Bonel, because we deeply admire him, and we deeply love him as a person. So that was the only difference from a normal film. It was how the work with 2 cinematographers, but it was very organic because each voice was completely different. So it was not much of a difference at the same time.
And there are cool, unusual things like the iris in, iris out, the way certain transitions, and I mean, people will have to see, but I mean, and also the other really notable thing we have to just say before we go to the audience here for questions is, what a cast, I guess, and especially, not as, you know, we could talk about each of them, but I mean, it's been a while since we've seen Kevin Kline in a part this big, this great, and I guess this was a conversation that came out of a conversation you and Kate had?
Well, Kate was another one. I mean, same as Chivo. It was very clear from my conversations. When I sent her the script, and she said yes, immediately we started a conversation. And she's incredible. She's like an alien, Kate.
Yeah.
She's the brightest, I don't know, she must have like the biggest IQ in planet Earth. Together with talented, but sensitive, funny, and right away the conversation about the thematic elements, for instance, and how we were going to approach each single thing. She became, again, another co-filmmaker. He was involved, and when you see Cate Blanchett, that there's a credit that says executive producer, produced by Cate Blanchett, and I know that we live in a time that with many actors it's a cosmetic kind of credit. Right. With Kate, it's a full-on. She's so involved in each one of the processes. Yeah. You know, and the collaboration in the screenplay, triggering a lot of rewrites. Then after with the casting, you know, I was conversing with her all these casting possibilities, and pretty much I knew that if she was hesitant, I would not go there. Right. At the same time, she's so respectful. I says, I don't see it like that. I says, okay, I'm moving on, you know, in a perfect collaboration like that. And it was Kate, actually, because we were really scratching our heads of who was going to play this character. And we wanted somebody who would be unexpected. And
just so people know, without giving much weight, they're essentially bucking heads, these characters.
Yes, there's the antagonist,
yes,
if you might.
Yes.
And I think she was in New York at the time, and she called me and said, I was at dinner last night, and we were talking about a fish called Wanda. Mm-hmm. And it was like immediately, I said, you mean Kevin? He says, yes, Kevin. He says, wow, let's go for it. Yeah. Let's go for it. Yeah. I always admired Kevin. And it's kind of like a cinema scene that the cinema let him go. What happened? He's incredible.
Yeah, no, and this is one of the great roles of his very great career. So it's really a treat to get to see him doing his thing again. I'm going to turn this over to the audience. We do not have mics going around, so I'm going to have you say your question when I call on you. Questions, I will just note, are brief and end with a question mark. And What I will then do is, because this is being filmed, I'm going to repeat your question. So I know in the room we might all hear it. That's why I'm doing it, so that it's on camera as well. We'll start over here, please.
What do you think is the biggest shift of your focus as a filmmaker when you were young, right after kicked out of school, compared to now? Your focus, personal focus, with personal vision as a filmmaker, how has it shifted? How has it evolved?
So just to repeat for the cameras, the question is how from the time when you were invited to leave film school till now has your approach most changed?
I have to say, it's not a joke.
Yeah.
I think that after that thing of film school, after going to film school and those early years, everything goes downhill. But I mean it in the sense that, and I think part of the struggle all the time is to recover not only that sense of innocence with the work, and that sense of wonder, but this kind of fearlessness, and the moment in which sometimes I try to cling when I feel that I'm weakening, that emotion, that sensation that when I was 17, and the reasons why I wanted to make cinema. Because those were the pure, honest reasons. Sometimes later on, when you start doing your work, is either there is the whole perception of, not only in terms of a business, but the perception of yourself as established artist, if you might, that you feel that maybe is drifting away from who you really are. You know, and I think we have to cling to those things. Of course, you gain a maturity to understand the world, a maturity of concepts and so on. But I would put that as irrelevant compared to that pure sense of wonder.
We're going to go to the very back. Somebody way back there, you'll just have to project. Yep. In the back left. Yep. Please stand. Yep.
Hi. So, looking at our cells, our body, our brain is probably the one organ that we define ourselves with. And I was wondering, looking at your body of work, what is a moment that you look at and say, this is a pure and bare reflection of myself and my character that I wanted to convey and I've managed to do so?
So the question, I think, to summarize it, is when you look back at your body of work, which project in some ways is the most direct embodiment of who you are and what you believe in?
Once that I finish a film, I have never seen them again. You know, I finish them and at the end of each project, I become kind of very critical about the project. And usually it's with Chivo that we have conversations about stuff that we like, that were virtues, that we should try to experiment and do again. But mostly is all the mistakes. It's to learn from the mistakes. And I always say that the reason I make a film is for what I learn for the next one. It's not for the result itself of each one of them. But if I have to think of, because everything is now about the memory and about the experience, and maybe the experience of doing one scene. And if I have to look back into my memory of the experiences, my favorite film is A Little Princess, more than any other. And I think in that one, it was more alive, that sense of wonder and purity and innocence. You know, and probably I haven't seen it again, and maybe it's filled with mistakes. You know, actually, now that finally we're doing a remastering of A Little Princess to present it again, it was yesterday, the day before yesterday, Chivo calls me and says, hey, have you seen the work they are doing? He says, no, I haven't. He says, you may want to see it because you will see that there are some cranes and some dollies that are kind of shaky. Now, we can fix them now with all the tools that we have and stuff. We can fix them. What do you think? I says, well, no, the thing is, it should be the projection of who we were. You know, I'm against restoration of filmmakers that suddenly they create and they redo the whole thing. You know, with all the, Blade Runner, I'll give you an example. I know that it's an amazing version, the one that really did, but it differs to the original one done in a specific moment of time when Ridley was a specific person. So I prefer to keep those mistakes as part of the package of also, you know, is those mistakes cohabit so beautifully with purity.
And next year will be 30 years since A Little Princess. Can you believe that?
Thank you. Thank you.
We are going to close with one last question. We're going to come to the aisle here. There's a person right on the aisle. Yes? You? Yeah?
First of all, thank you so much for coming and Japan. Filmmakers like to credit film festivals, obviously, as events that will forever change their lives and whatnot. So I'm curious to know if you have a specific memory from a film festival or a screening that you remember being like, this is why I wanted to be a filmmaker. I'm so super happy to be here.
So, Alfonso, the question, I believe, is in your experience with your own films, or maybe just even before your own films, what's your most kind of impactful film festival experience?
Well, since I was a kid, I heard about these film festivals. I'm so old that I still remember newspaper clippings in which they would talk about the Cannes Film Festival or the Venice Film Festival with black and white photos of, and it was something was so exotic and so remote. And then I find myself, maybe I was 16, backpacking in Europe, and I found myself in Venice, and I was in the Lido, and I'm walking, and it was, I guess, November, and everything was deserted. There was nobody. And I came across this big statue. And it was so weird. It was like a Fellini thing because it was all foggy. And then I started looking around, and they tell me that it was the decorations from the film festival, from the stage in the film festival that they have dumped, and they were on the beach. And I was like, wow, this is where they do the Venice Film Festival. I was like, wow, that would be so cool one day to be there. But then festivals also, for my generation in Mexico, it was like an impossible thing. It was something so far away. Also, there was a sense of impossibility for the thing. My very first festival, and I will always be grateful to that festival because in many ways, that festival created my career. And I will never stop thinking that festival is this festival. My very first festival, the very first time. Yeah, guys. And I have the memory of going in a gala screening to introduce my film. You know, they will introduce the cast and stuff. I was so nervous, and I had sorted some kind of decent pants that were not on my jeans. And I was so nervous with my hands in my pockets. And then they showed me a photograph, and obviously the pants were big, and I was with the hands in my pocket like this, open like that. Yeah, it was kind of, I looked ridiculous. And I felt small, is what I remember. Being in the Toronto Film Festival, presenting my first film.
This was solo,
Juan Solo con tu pareja. But then, you know what? this festival was for me, as it's been for many other filmmakers, so generous. And it's been like a launching pad for so many careers. So thank you, Toronto.
And thank you, Alfonso. We really appreciate it. Thanks for coming. Yeah, thank you.